All right, all right. I am super excited to bring this guest to the stage. You guys know him, you guys love him. We're gonna have so much fun here today. Let's get a big warm round of applause for the one, the only, Andy Serkis, everybody! Thank you for that.
Well, hello.
How's it going? How's your day been so far?
Oh, it's been amazing. It's been wonderful. I love Austin. It's such a great place. You are so lucky, you guys who live here, obviously.
Woo! You probably don't really have the opportunity to explore too much of the city this weekend, do you?
Well, I've found 6th Street. You don't need to find anything else, really, do you? I mean, let's face it.
We're hearing some gasps. I guess that must be a fun area of town. So, kind of to start, I wanted to know, did your love for directing and writing come concurrently with your love of acting, or did one develop from the other? How did that work for you?
Well, it's an interesting question because in a way, before I became an actor, I went to college to study visual arts. So I kind of became an actor by accident in a way. In my first year, you had to do a secondary course at the college, and I didn't really want to do anything but paint and do graphic design and what I'd gone to do. And then, so having to choose something, there was a very strong theatre studies course. So I started kind of designing sets and making props and things for their plays, and then I started acting. And then by the end of the first year, I'd completely changed my mind and decided I'd be an actor. But I've always been a storyteller visually, I suppose, through painting and so on. So that's always stayed with me, and as my kind of desire to act kind of grew, and that took me into away from theatre and into film, I then began to become again more interested in the idea of telling stories visually, on screen, and so they kind of grew together, I suppose, in a way.
That's awesome, and that you are so multifaceted in the arts as well. Graphic design, set design, that's so neat. And I wanted to ask because you mentioned theater, and I saw you also did a bunch of Shakespearean productions, and I wanted to know if you could tell us a little bit about maybe some of your favorite Shakespeare plays that you've been in?
So I was very fortunate when I was kind of an aspirant actor to work in Manchester, in the north of England.
Ooh, from Manchester, all right.
at a theatre called the Royal Exchange. I actually went to college up in Lancaster, which is again in the north of England, but the sort of my formative years were at this theatre called the Royal Exchange, which was a completely in the round theatre, which was an amazing place. It was like a kind of in this very old grand building, but this very modern structure which had seated 750 people in this sort of drum that kind of raised up into the gods, and there I got to do a number of Shakespeare plays, one of which was Othello, and I got to play Iago, which is one of the great roles, and taught me an enormous amount about audience relationship. It's an incredible character. For those of you who may not know the play, it's all about jealousy, and it's about two men, a man in command, in control, who is brought down by another man who is jealous of his position, but it's a lot of the soliloquies and talking to the audience and connecting with the audience is a huge part of that role, and the audience kind of bizarrely, he is the villain, he's a smiling villain, but they cannot wait for him to come back on stage, because although it's at the fall of this great majestic character Othello, Iago is actually very manipulative but kind of fun character, that kind of people want to see more of. So it was an amazing role, and
do you have any superstitions when it comes to theater productions, or maybe even in film as well?
I wouldn't say superstitions. I suppose that I have triggers and sort of habits which kind of enable me to get into character. So I'll do certain things before going on. I remember. When you're working in theatre, there's the moment that you step onto the stage. I mean, some people, actors work in different ways, but some people can be chattering to a fellow actor off stage and then go, oh, I'm on, and then just walk on. Others have to kind of get into the zone, and I'm definitely one that has to get into the zone. So yeah, I find ways of stimulating my memory and mind and to walk onto the stage and so on.
Because I'm always so curious about people that have been in productions of, we'll say, the Scottish play, and that won't call it right, that name, which I guess I'm superstitious enough that I won't say it.
Well, I can say it, Macbeth, and because I'm not superstitious in that way.
That's good.
But actually, yeah, no, I have. In fact, in that very theatre, in the Royal Exchange Theatre, there was a production of Macbeth that I was in also. And it did have a strange, like the opening night, the actress playing Lady Macbeth fainted and just passed out on stage and had to be carried off. And so, you know, there is an enormous amount of that play does carry.
I know, right? And the ghost light. I know. That's craziness. So how would you say your approach to performance differs from being in a live stage theater production to being in front of a camera? What's your mentality like?
I've always maintained that acting is acting, and it's the process of creating the character is pretty much the same whether you're on stage or whether you're in a motion capture suit, whether you're in front of a camera in a regular conventional costume and makeup. You know, it's for me, it's the process of becoming the role and how the triggers and the stimuli and the research and all of those things which go into creating a character. Really, obviously when you're on stage you have to, you know, there is an element of projecting and you're in character for 3 hours of a night as opposed to short bursts of being in character when you're on film. But, so, I mean, ideally, I think, you know, actors who have some kind of stage experience, because they have to use their entire body on stage, whereas some actors who have only done screen work, you know, tend to when they're performing in a close-up, they only tend to use the top half of their body. So you sort of can see people who have had a theatrical background, because they you know, their process of creating the character will include a physical kind of investigation of the part as much as a vocal or intellectual kind of way into the role. But I still do believe that you know, if I were playing any character, and that's what, again, when people started to, you know, or I had to sort of explain to people what motion capture was about and the process of creating digital characters, it really is no different at all to creating a character in a more conventional setting. You know?
And I have to say, I really do love your stance with motion capture about being able to not use actual animals. You know, we can use these visuals and motion capture in order to portray these beautiful animals and other creatures. Can you tell us a little bit more about your stance on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about characterization, and you know, we have a technology. You know, that was what was so exciting to me when I first started working with performance capture. It's actually called performance capture, not just motion capture. Motion is literally capturing a physicality, but performance capture is the entire performance all in one hit. You know, the facial capture, audio, just the performance of the actor, basically authoring the role. I forgot what your question was. What were you saying?
Your stance about we don't have to use real animals.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, when we were making, and I don't know how many people have seen Mowgli. That was an example of working with really talented physical actors to find different ways of creating not just humanoid animals but quadruped animals, and that was a technique that we sort of really developed on that show. So it is possible. You can actually puppeteer and create literally like old-fashioned like a pantomime horse in effect. You know, like you've got the front end and the back end and a flexible spine which connects two actors, and then they can literally drive the movement of a tiger or a you know, a panther, or you know, it is incredible what can be achieved.
So brilliant. Can you tell us a little bit more about Imaginarium Studios, which is a performance capture studio that, of course, you run?
Yeah. So back in 2004, back in the UK, having been aboard making a film which we can't talk about, or a series of 3 films which we can't talk about, but you get the picture. And actually, well, it wasn't those 3 films. There was another film which we can't talk about. And but I came back from the experience of playing a creature, and well, not the small one, the big one. And I came back to the UK, and I was asked to direct a video game. And and for me, again, it was a time when there was a big shift in video games, as I'm sure a lot of you know. There was in the sort of early 2004, 2005, when character became really important for video game. It wasn't just about gameplay, it was also about telling a story, writing a really great script, it being a visual experience as well as, you know, as well as the playing of the game. And so I was asked to direct it, and we were going to be using performance capture, and when it came to actually, we rehearsed it, and as we were getting close to the end of rehearsals, it was just like, well, where are we going to shoot this? In the UK, there wasn't anywhere that we could shoot it that had the degree of you know, expertise that I'd been used to working with in New Zealand. And so I ended up taking the entire production back to New Zealand to shoot. And when I came back from that experience, I was like, this is crazy. The cameras are made just up the road in Oxford, and you know, the software is made in Cambridge, and we're having to travel right across the world, much as though I loved returning to New Zealand. So I decided that there and then it would be a good idea to set up a studio that was dedicated to creating digital characters. That was a creative space where you could bring writers, directors, you know, people who wanted to create, you know, stories and tell stories using digital characters, and that's how the Imaginarium was born. So I partnered with a very, very close friend of mine now. We've been working together for 15 years, Jonathan Cavendish, who is my producing partner, who's produced a lot of very, very big films. And we've just had the most amazing ride. And partially what we wanted to do is to create not just a technical facility, but a place that was really about finding stories, as I say, that we wanted to tell using this medium. And so we had a production company aligned to the studio, the physical studio itself, where we could begin to tell stories.
Can you tell us a little bit about how it's evolved, how performance capture has evolved over the past couple of years?
Yeah, sure. I mean, over the last, I can give you a snapshot of the whole journey, really, from when I came on board. You know, it really moved throughout the course of many of the films that I've been involved in, from being just capturing physicality to, as I was saying earlier, why it moved from motion capture to performance capture, to actually be able to, because it came from the medical industry, actually. People might not know this. So for instance, the act of putting on GPS markers, and then having cameras which track a certain point in your body, came from the medical industry to help with rehabilitation of injury, and like, for instance, you know, analysing gait and the way that you walk after an injury, and then it started to be used in video games as you know, for capturing athletes or martial artists or tennis players or footballers. You know, then it was used for actors, and again it was just capturing physicality. But then when we started to use markers on the face, that was then moving it on another stage where you could then literally capture facial expressions, and that was in sort of the mid 2000, you know, 2005 to 2010. But you had to do all of this in a studio, and then over the course of the next 10 years, it sort of moved out of the studio where you could actually put motion capture cameras on live locations, up in the, the woods or in the, in the mountains or wherever you were shooting. They could be placed, and the actors in performance capture suits. With now that you weren't tethered to technology in the studio, you could wear head-mounted cameras and packs, which meant that you could travel anywhere, and your entire performance could be caught wherever you were.
It's come such a long way, and it's so cool. I had no idea about the medical beginnings of it. That's so neat. Well, speaking of mountains, I know you're a climber and a mountaineer, and I know you've climbed mountains. Can you tell us a little bit about like your mountain climbing? Is that what do I call it?
Yeah, no,
climbing.
Climbing. I mean, I really, ever since I was, sort of from the age of about 10 years old, I was obsessed with mountains, and I went on a climbing trip at school, and just fell in love with it there and then, and so everything from rock climbing to mountaineering, and then over the course of the next few years, sort of learning how to climb in alpine conditions with rock and ice mixed climbs and so on and so forth, and it sort of just grew on me, and so I've climbed in various places all over the world, it's for me, it's such the mountain environment is. I'm not a religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person, and I feel really spiritually alive up in the mountains. Those places for me kind of really speak to me, and very transcending places to be. And I've done a lot of solo climbing. I climbed the Matterhorn in Switzerland, solo climbed the Matterhorn, and other peaks, and so it's been a huge passion and a driving force in my life.
And I saw you also did a climb for, was it Best Beginnings charity? Was that the charity as well?
That's right. Yeah. That was that wasn't a climb actually. That was a trek really to Everest Base Camp, which I did with my family, and to raise money for this really wonderful charity, Best Beginnings, that we were involved with for some years.
Do you do any other like extreme things? Like, have you ever bungee jumped or anything? Swam with the sharks?
It's so
like
weird. I'm not very good at doing things where you risk your life. Actually, I say that climbing's pretty risky, but I mean, where you're not in control of your own destiny in a way. Climbing, it's up to you. If you muck it up, it's your fault. But tying yourself to something and throwing yourself off a building expecting to bounce, no. No, not for me. No, I mean, or jumping out of an aeroplane tied to something which may or may not work. Nah, forget it.
That's right. Okay, climbing. We'll stick to climbing. To go back to directing a little bit, I wanted to know if you could talk to us about your process that goes into planning to direct your films.
I feel incredibly lucky. When I was still doing theatre, I started to direct and make short films, but I was incredibly lucky that I have worked with some amazing film directors, and you can't help but act like a magpie and steal ideas from people along the way. It's inevitable in our profession, in most professions. If someone once said, what's the word? If you plagiarize, the artist that plagiarizes, we all plagiarize, but the artist who steals is really learning, and that's what you do. You learn technique, you learn craft, you learn from observing and from understanding everybody's job in the film industry, actually, and understanding everybody's department. And I think having the access to working with brilliant film directors, but also with like visual effects artists, and in the films that I've done where it's been heavily digitally, the characters have been very heavily digitally created. I learnt an enormous amount from my years down in New Zealand, and from Peter Jackson particularly, who was such a major source of inspiration to me, and who gave me a wonderful opportunity directing the second unit on a film we can't talk about, and or a trilogy that we can't talk about. I mean, I was on the way we'd set the Imaginarium up, and again, that was with a view to me directing my own projects and things that I was writing and interested in, stories that I was interested in telling. And I think for me, the thing about directing is I love every aspect of creating a film, from the script development through to putting the team together, through to working with the director of photography, through to the shoot itself, editing process, working with the composer. All of these elements are, I love every part of it. I mean, obviously working with actors on a set, and that moment where it all starts to come together and the scenes, you don't know what you start. The thing is, you start a day and you don't know whether the scene that you're about to shoot is going to be disaster or going to be incredible. So it's a real roller coaster ride. So all you can do, it's all about preparation as much as you can do. And obviously the different scales of films that you're working on require different amounts of preparation. If it's there's a lot of CG, if there's a lot of visual effects, then you have to work with a team and break it down and do pre-visualizations, sort of storyboards and so on and so forth, but digital storyboarding with previs. So I think what you have to do is you have to have all of that planning and preparation, and then you have to sort of just be in the moment once you're on set with the actors. And it's a kind of bizarre, sort of mercurial sort of thing where you know it's not working, and then you gradually nudge it this way a little bit. You give the performance notes, you're changing the lighting, you're changing the camera angles, and then gradually it starts to all fall into place. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned, actually, there's two things really. One is that when you start off directing, you think you've got to absolutely do everything yourself, and you have to learn. And I think the best directors really learn to delegate and listen to everybody on set, because everyone is an expert in their field. And the directors, I think, who just think, I'm going to just make this my way, is missing out on so many voices and opinions and valuable kind of ideas. And then the other thing is creating an atmosphere, which I firmly believe is the most important thing, is a happy set, and creating an atmosphere where everyone feels that they can do their best work and contribute 150%, and those are things that I think, and I do think like actor directors are good at that. They're very good at, because they understand the pressure that everyone's under. I think actors do make good directors because they understand performance and what a performer needs to get to, and what different performers need. I mean, in a room you might have a whole bunch of actors who have their own processes of working, and some like to talk through a scene, some don't want to talk through a scene, some need to be noted on every take, some don't want notes, and you've got to really learn what everybody, it is like being a parent. I've got 3 children. It is like being a parent. You are the responsible adult in the room, which is allowing and creating an environment for everyone to do their best.
Out of curiosity, after a production wraps, whether you're acting in it, directing, do you have any rituals for when a production's done, completed, before it comes out? Or?
What, like a kind of like an literally end of shoot kind of moment.
Yeah, a way to celebrate.
Yeah, there's always a celebration on the wrap. It's just like the kind of the tension that you carry throughout 50, 60, 70, 80 days of shooting. Which is intense days, and days where you don't sleep, where you're doing 16 to 20 hours a day and getting very, very, very little sleep. Suddenly it's like you come out the other end of it, and it's you've been on this phenomenal journey with hundreds of people, and suddenly your lives are all going to go separate ways, and so it's a very cathartic, wonderful experience. But you'll be saying goodbye to people that you may never ever work with again. Some of whom you will, because you tend to sort of build a team over the years that you work with. But it's both a very sort of magical moment, and then but also very sad, and because that it's but also wonderful, because that everyone's going on to different jobs, and they're moving on, and you go through these life cycles, and no matter whether a shoot is sort of, 5 weeks long or 2.5 years of working together in some cases, there's always a beginning, middle, and an end. It's always a story in itself, So.
I was wondering, because we only have a couple minutes left,
Oh, no.
do you ever tie music with your process? Like, is there an artist or band that you ever listen to, whether you're, thinking about directing or acting? Any?
Sure. I mean, not. There's never one. I mean, every different project demands you to, obviously, because when you're putting together a movie, you have in your mind a kind of a version of the score, which is going to pull all this, that will pull all the visuals together, and so you're listening constantly to inspirational pieces of music from different, writers, composers, and so on and so forth. So it's never just one thing for me.
Variety.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. Well, this has been such a pleasure. Before we do wrap it up, is there any thoughts you want to leave us with here on this fine Sunday night?
Yeah.
I guess it's night now.
I mean, one
Saturday. What day is it? What week? What year is it?
I have no
It's
idea.
Saturday.
Most of the time, I have no idea. But I just got to say, it is. I've been doing a few conventions this year, and I've not done many actually until this year. I have to say that the stories that you like, and the franchises and the mythologies that you all believe in and are passionate about, are you are such a huge part of the filmmaking process. Don't underestimate your value to the filmmaking process. Your taste, your desire, your passion, it feeds us, and we know that we are, the existence that we all have, we share together because we are as passionate about making the stories as you are about receiving them, and we can't do it without you. And the mythologies that are created, the modern day mythologies, are a long part of the lineage of classic storytelling, which goes back to Greek mythology, which goes back to ancient versions of storytelling. And so for all of the modern franchises and the big passionate genre movies that we all love, we're all part of a very, very long heritage of storytelling, and I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you and other people like you who are passionate believers in those stories, and who allow me to have an incredible opportunity to help tell them. So thank you.
Thank you.